Hi guys, welcome back to the lessons. Today, what's the topic for today? Today we're going to look at economic paradigm, which is a subsection of a business cycle. But before we do that, let's look at our exam guideline. What is it saying? Remember, this is the most important document. This is the Bible of our economics. So we are guided by this document. So now let's see on page 8 of the exam guideline. Let's see what are they saying are the most important things that you need to know with regards to the economic paradigm. Right, the economic paradigm, there it is. Trying to make it bigger so that you can see. Right. There we have the new economic paradigm, the smoothing of cycles. So what do we need to know in this part? We need to know what is the definition of the new economic paradigm. We need to know the demand side policies. Under demand side policies, we have inflation and unemployment. And then we're going to look at a supply side policy. Under supply side policy, we look at the three things: reduction in cost, improvement in the efficiency of inputs, improvement in the efficiency of markets. Right. Then they give us clues on type of questions that you must look at when you are doing this this part. It says 1, you must be able to define the new economic paradigm, explain the meaning of smoothing of cycles, discuss demand and supply side policies with the aid of graphs. Very NBB, with the aid of graphs. So when you do this part, you must be able to draw the graphs and you must be able to explain it. And then we have a hot question. Our hot question for this part is: explain how supply side and demand side policies would be used to stimulate economic activity in the smoothing of cycles. So this one, maybe they can ask it. It can be a 50-mark question, but I don't think necessarily that they would ask it in the same way, but it's just something that you need to know for yourselves. So those are the things that you need to know with regard to the part that we are going to do today. We're going to be very short today because it's only a subsection. We're not doing the whole chapter, which is a good thing, really. All right. So make sure that you get your hands on the Economics Exam Guideline, Grade 12, 2014, which is a recommendation that both teachers and learners have access to the exam guideline. All right then. So, what are we doing now? So we are going to start now to look at, first, we have to understand what is the new economic paradigm. What is it all about? I hope my cookies can be nice and thick. Other people have been calling and complaining that they can't see the writing. So let's see. So we have the new. Right. We have the new economic now I have to a little bit. Oh, yes. I love these gadgets. Right. So there we have it. We have the new economic paradigm. So, fine. For you to be able to understand this part, go back to the first chapter. Remember we said in the first chapter that we've got 4 participants. Right, the 4 participants, we have them because we are in an open economy. But now, let's assume that in a country we have a closed economy. So we've got these three participants, which is the businesses, the households, and the government. But now here's the thing. We've got the households on the left, we've got the businesses on the right. In the middle, we've got the government. Everything must be, remember we said the government must take care of public goods, they must control the economy, they must take care of our resources. But now here's the thing. If you are the government and you have households on the left, you have the businesses on the right, the question is, who is more important? Are the households more important to the government, or are the businesses more important to the government? Because remember, the government must take care of both. But now the question is, who does the government favor more? Nope, they can't favor anybody. And it means they must treat both these sectors equally. They must know that the demands of the households are taken care of. Also take care of the demands of the businesses. And we must reach a point of equilibrium, a consensus between these three, so that there must be harmony in the country. That is why now they say it's a new economic paradigm. The government must make sure that they satisfy both the households and the businesses. So when we talk about economic paradigm, we talk about a situation where now you find that we have the demand side and the supply side. Both of them, they must be satisfied. And we have to make sure that when you talk about economic paradigm, you know that aggregate demand must always be equal to aggregate supply. We know what are the effects if aggregate demand is higher than aggregate supply, or if aggregate supply is higher than aggregate demand, which is what we are going to do now. When we look, it's trying to show us some of those. Right then. So now they say, the new economic paradigm, when you look at the new economic paradigm, you'll find that it does have only the two policies. Now you go back. Remember, now we're talking about the business cycles. We said that we've got the exogenous factors that cause the business cycle, and then we've got the endogenous factors that cause the business cycle. But now what is the difference between those two? The exogenous, which was the monetarist, they said no government intervention because the markets are inherently stable. But then we have the endogenous factors, which is the Keynesians. They say, because the market is inherently unstable, it is the duty, the obligation of the government to make sure that they intervene in the market. So now, what is the government to do? To intervene or not to intervene? That is the question. Let's try and solve that. So, now for the government to make sure that nobody is complaining, the businesses are happy, the households are happy, no complaints, but you know it will never happen. We complain anyway. So, then we know that, okay, under the new economic paradigm, we have the demand side policies. We have our demand side policies, which is all the demands that you get from the side of the household, the consumers. And then we also have the supply side policies. And you remember, we're saying in economics, we always want everything to be in a point of equilibrium. The scale must not be tipped. It must be even. So, now let's look at the demand side policy then. Right? Let's see, is this thick enough? No. Right, let's start from the demand side policies then. Let's see, what are the concerns from the demand side policies? Right. And remember, I cannot emphasize this too much. We use different books, but the most important thing is to follow the guideline. What does the guideline want? First, you must know what is the economic paradigm. So we've talked about the economic paradigm. So now we come to the demand side policies. All right then. So now there they are. We're saying, remember in economics we're saying aggregate demand must always be equal to aggregate supply. If that is not happening, we have a problem. So now let's look at what is it that they demand from the side of the consumers. So now from the side of the consumers, they are concerned with two things. Two things that they are concerned about. We worry about inflation and we worry about unemployment. So those are the two things that now we have to look at from the side of the demand side. Inflation and unemployment. So, before we do that, now let's look at what inflation is. You know what we're talking about when we talk about inflation. Inflation is a general increase in the price level. And remember, it must be a rapid increase over a period of time. So we're saying, okay, fine, we have a general increase in the price level, which is our inflation. But now here's the thing. How does this happen? In an economy, technology does this all the time. So we have our graph here. I'm very notorious with drawing lines. I hope I can draw the straight ones. At least here I have a ruler. So there we have. How to see there how this happens. So on this one we have real output, and this side we have price level. To the percentage there, percentage there. Right then. So now what are we saying? Alright then. So, back to business. So now look at this. If the households then, maybe there is an increase in wages, and then because of the increase in wages, we find that our disposable income increases. And when disposable income increases, we increase our expenditure. When expenditure increases, we increase our demand. So what's going to happen? You find that the demand curve will shift to the right because of the increase. There it shifts from D to D1, D1 there. But now what is the problem? As you can see, demand has shifted to the right, but supply has remained the same. So which means the problem there that we are going to encounter is, you find that now, yes, we have spent more, we have increased our quantity, but the catch is when demand increases but supply remains the same, then you see that we are going to have an increase now in price. So you see there, then the price increases there to P1. So now to ensure that we always have lower prices and to curb inflation in our economy, what is required? The requirement is when demand shifts to the right, also supply must shift. So there is our supply. So our supply also will also shift to the right. So when that happens, you see that the prices remain the same, even though the quantity demanded might increase. Because the most important thing as consumers that we are concerned about is that we must make sure that the price level remains the same, regardless of the quantity demanded in the economy. So when you look at this, then that is what they are trying to tell us there under inflation. So the solution there is to make sure that when demand increases, supply must also increase. So from the demand side, we're saying when demand moves, we must always make sure that supply is flexible. So now let's look at this in practical words. So what did we say then? We said, just a little bit higher. Okay. So now on the graph there, what did you see? You see that aggregate demand and aggregate supply are at a equilibrium. Oh no. So aggregate demand and aggregate supply are at equilibrium. Where is that? You see, when we're drawing the first one, which is when curve D and S, where they are, this is equilibrium A, then they are at equilibrium. This is at point A. Now let's see, this is B, this is C. Alright then. So now what happens? If aggregate demand increases without an increase in aggregate supply, what's going to happen? There we saw what happened. When aggregate demand shifted to the right from D to D1, there was no increase in supply. So what is going to happen now in the economy? So you will find that now aggregate demand has increased without an increase in aggregate supply. Then prices increase. All this is at point B. So now to ensure that prices remain low, then it means 1, aggregate supply increases when aggregate demand increases when aggregate supply increases as well. So what is the effect of that? If aggregate demand increases when aggregate supply increases, then you will see that prices will decrease. But now what happens to quantity? So quantity will increase. So you see there that now because we had a shift in aggregate demand, shifted from D to D1, and then supply shifted from S to S1, then when they both shifted, then we went back to the decrease in price there. So you find that now when aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal again, then we're going to have a decrease in prices. So with that, then it means the government will always be sure that inflation will remain intact. And then we look at unemployment now. We're still on the demand side policy. Now we look at unemployment. How is unemployment affected? Right. Okay. So now look at this. We draw to explain the relationship between inflation and unemployment. We are going to draw the Phillips curve. Right. So let's give it a name. This is the Phillips curve. Right then. So how does this work? So the Phillips curve, it looks at the relationship between unemployment and inflation. And I'm sure you know that we've got people that are on strike. They're striking so that they can raise their wages and salaries. But what are the after effects of having a high raise or too much of a raise? Then we will see how that works for us. Yeah. Okay. And bring it closer a little bit. Okay. All right. Now you're too close. So the Phillips curve, we measure unemployment, we look at the unemployment percentage on the horizontal side, and then we've got inflation on the vertical side. So what is it saying? Let's do it like this. Always best to use a ruler. we have the, remember we said we measure the relationship between unemployment and inflation. So let's see how it goes. So there we have the inflation rate. So let's see. So let's say the inflation rate here is at 2%, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14%. So at 0.0 we have inflation rate at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Right. So now what does the Phillips curve show us? Assuming that unemployment is at 14%. If unemployment is at 14%, then it means, as you can see there, our inflation is at 0%. So which means if our unemployment is a little bit high at 14%, then we have zero inflation. But then we go and we complain as consumers that no, unemployment is too high. The government must make a plan to make sure that they decrease the unemployment. Fine, then they decide to decrease it. Then they said, okay, we are going to decrease unemployment by 2%. Sorry, let's say by 4%. Right. So if they decrease the unemployment by 4%, then it means, oh, I hope my line is straight. Right, there you see it. So they have now decreased unemployment. There is the new unemployment rate. So if the unemployment rate now is at 10%, what is happening to inflation? Then you see that we have moved unemployment down from 14% to 10%. But the side effect of that is inflation is going to increase. Still, we're saying, inflation is 2%. Nah, in South Africa we are happy with 3 to 6%. So we still complain that unemployment is too high. Please, government, do something about it. The government says, okay, I am going to increase your unemployment. So the unemployment rate is increased again. So if they do that, let's see. They decrease the unemployment rate from 14% to 10%, from 10% to 8%. So if they do that, look at this. Then you find that the inflation rate increases as well. So when you look at this, you would see that now it forms a curve. There it is. Which is our Phillips curve, the PC, the original PC. So we're saying at point A we said unemployment was too high. It was at 14%, but inflation was low. Then we said, no. We have to decrease the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate was decreased from 14% by 4% to 10%. There, now it was at point B. At point B, unemployment rate is at 10%, but inflation rate now increased from 0 to 2%. But now we're saying, no, inflation, 2%, we can live with that. We still want our unemployment rate to go down. Then the unemployment goes down again from 10% to 8%. But now what happens? Look, the inflation now increased by 2 times the value of our decrease in unemployment. There, now, at point C. So now what is the government to do now? Because now at point C, again, now the demand side, which is the consumers again, are saying, no, 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 no. Now the prices are too high. We are not happy at all. So what is the government to do now? So the best thing for the government is to do the vice versa and try and decrease it again up to the point where they feel that it is an acceptable rate, an acceptable unemployment rate versus the acceptable inflation rate. Which means now they are going to choose at point D. Then they say, okay, at least at 9% we are breaking even. Because at 9% we will have the right unemployment rate and also an acceptable level of an increase in price. So people will be happy that way. That one is the Phillips curve. Right, when you read there, you will see there that it says exactly as we have constructed it there. So, let's write it now in words. So they say here, Phillips curve shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment. So as you can see there, the Phillips curve, which is our graph, shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment. So it shows that the natural rate of unemployment, when we started with the natural rate of unemployment. So the natural rate of unemployment was at 14%, which was at point A. So now what did we say? We said, we need the unemployment rate to go down. So now, but then, when you look at the natural unemployment rate at 14%, what do you realize? You see that inflation is at 0%, which means it is low. So, if the economy is stimulated in such a way that maybe then the government decides, okay, fine, we want to increase the unemployment. How are we going to do that? Fewer legal restrictions, fewer immigrations restrictions for skilled workers. We introduce SETAs in the economy. We improve the level of and the quality of education. We have effective training for beginners at work. Then you would see that, okay, fine, the natural rate of unemployment will decrease. So there we have it. We have at point B, No, let's not start. Let's start with unemployment. The unemployment rate decreases by 4%. So if it decreases by 4%, which means it's from 14 goes down to 10%. But now what is the side effect? What's going to happen now? Look at this. We said unemployment decreases from point A, and then it goes to 10%. At 10%, when unemployment decreases, when it decreases, then inflation rate goes up. Increases by 2%. And then at 2, if we are saying, okay, we are still happy with 2%, said now at point B, our unemployment rate is at 10%, inflation rate is at 2%. Now what's going to happen? Saying, nope, this is still too high. Please make sure that the unemployment rate decreases. So what happens when unemployment rate decreases? There's unemployment falls by another 2% to 8% at point C. So if unemployment falls by 2% to 8% at point C, now let's see what happens now. There we have unemployment was at 2% when we were at point D. Oh, sorry, unemployment was 10%. And then inflation rate was at 2%. But now our unemployment decreased by 2% from 10 to 8%. Now look at what happens to our inflation. Our inflation rate increases from 2% to 4%. So which means now our unemployment falls by 2% to 8% at point C. Then the inflation rate increases. It increases from 2% to 6%. So you see, now what are we saying here? Which means, what type of a relationship do we have between unemployment and inflation? There is an inverse relationship. Between unemployment and inflation rate. And remember, this is vice versa. So when you look at the graph, you would see that when unemployment decreases, inflation increases. If inflation would increase, then it means unemployment has increased. So whatever the government does, they are wrong when they do it, they are wrong when they don't do it. So it's for them to find a balance between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. So that is what the Phillips curve is trying to show us here. Right. That was the demand side of things from the consumers. Now let's look at the supply side. Supply side policies. From the supply side policies, you see that now the measures that the government has to take to make sure that the businesses are happy from the side of the supply are the following. The government has to make sure that they have a reduction of costs. They have a reduction of costs. So now, to ensure that they have a reduction of cost, what are they supposed to do? They have to make sure that the cost of making business in South Africa goes down. Because if the price of making business is too high, it's a knock-on effect on our prices of food and our prices of other consumer goods. So when they reduce the costs, then automatically the business side is going to be nice to us as consumers as well, and they're going to be happy. So if you want to have a reduction of costs, what are you supposed to do as the government? Make sure that you improve the infrastructure. We have infrastructure services. So they must provide them with infrastructure. Why? Because the cost of roads, the cost of water, energy are too high for businesses. So if the government ensures that they have, sometimes they should subsidize them, then the businesses will be happy. All right. So when we talk about infrastructure services, we talk about water, talk about energy, transport, even communication. I'm happy that the businesses are finally realizing that we are paying too high for the communication costs. So the government really tries. They want the businesses to get the profit, but they are looking after the consumers as well. So I hope you follow the case and you understand what goes there. Right. Then under supply side policies, they must have a reduction of costs. How do they have a reduction of costs? By making sure that they provide proper infrastructural services. Examples: water, energy, and transport. And then we have administrative cost. So also they must take care of administrative costs. So like for example, when they are filling forms for tax, they must be able to know what to do. It must not be too cumbersome and take too much time from them. And it must not take too long. So it means also it must be cheaper. And you must be able to know what you are doing when you are looking at administrative costs. Right? And then there must be as well cash incentives. There must also be cash incentives. Like for example, for those businesses that want to go and start businesses in smaller areas, in rural areas, they must be compensated for that. That is reduction of costs under supply side policies. Then the second part is the improving the efficiency of inputs. Improving the efficiency of inputs. So how do they ensure that they improve the efficiency of inputs? Tax rates. So how is the government going to ensure that they improve the efficiency of inputs? So they must make sure that they maintain low tax rates. Because if they charge too much income tax, people are not going to be motivated to go to work. Then it means they are losing revenue. As well, if the businesses are charged too much tax, they are not going to be motivated to pay tax. They won't be motivated as well to provide some of these goods. So government must look at the tax rates. The second factor that they must look at, capital consumption. capital consumption, which means they must allow depreciation to take place. So they must compensate businesses if their machinery has depreciated, and they must allow them to get rid of it maybe 3 or 5 years after they've used it at a lower cost without charging them. If they can do that, then the businesses will be happy as well. Human resource development. Under human resource development, what is the government to do here? They have to improve the quality of labor. So how do they improve the quality of labor? We've already talked about this. Said the government, they make sure that there is efficient training for people that are starting jobs. As well, they have to make sure that the quality of education is tops. Everybody knows what to do when they move. The movement from the school to the job market must not be too much of a transition. You must not be blank when you get to work. You don't know how to use even some of the small gadgets that are used at work. So you must be able to know how to work, and also how at school. What you have studied at school must be relevant. As well, we have SETAs that are helping as well with human resource development. And we know that we have a skills authority as well. So that one helps with human resource development. And then they must also provide free advisory services. So how do they advise for free? Like if somebody wants to go and start a new market for a certain product as an export, they should help in those instances so that people can be able to go and establish businesses. And they must help with research and development so that everybody, when you start a new business, you don't have to start from scratch, you use too much money. So if there is free advisory services, people will be happy as well. Like for example, we look at research and development. They must do R&D so that people already know what in the market, which goods are acceptable, which goods are not going to be acceptable. The weather service, because some businesses are controlled by the weather. So they need to know whether it's going to rain. But these days, the weather has been so confused. Let's hope they get it right eventually. Right, so those were the factors under improving efficiency of inputs. Tax rates, capital consumption, human resource development, and free advisory services. Alright then we come to the last factor under supply side policies, which is improving efficiency of markets. So here we are improving the efficiency of markets. Okay, so if you want your markets to be improved, there are 3 things that they should look at to ensure that aggregate demand and aggregate supply are always equal. They adjust at the same time. Number 1, deregulation. The removal of all these long laws that cause a lot of bureaucracy. So when we talk about deregulation, means they must remove some laws, not all of them, remove laws and regulations. Other government controls as well. They must be looked at. remove laws and regulations, other government controls that interfere in the market. Right. So that is deregulation there. And then we have competition. So, what is the government to do now? They must encourage new companies. So, new businesses in the market, so that we don't have too many monopolies. We have collusions in the market, because these people, they own the market. And then the last factor, leveling the playing fields. Under leveling the playing fields, we know that public companies, here it's public companies versus private companies. So the problem here is, we know that public companies, they are protected by the government, their liability is limited. So now the private companies cannot compete fairly against the public companies. So it is the duty of the government to make sure that they level the playing field, everybody plays fair, so that everybody must benefit in the economy. Right then, so we're almost now at the end. I'm just going to quickly rephrase. So we said, when we started, we were doing the economic paradigm. And remember, we said the economic paradigm has got two policies, which is the demand side policies and the supply side policies. Under the demand side policies, they look at inflation and unemployment. So we looked at inflation, and then we looked at the graph that was explaining the relationship between demand and supply, with all the explanation there. All right. So, and then we came to unemployment. So under unemployment, we were doing the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve, the one that we said, it shows the relationship between unemployment and inflation. And then on the supply side policies, from the side of the supply side policies, we said there are three factors. One is the reduction of costs. The reduction of costs has got three subsections: infrastructure, administrative costs, and cash incentives. Under improving the efficiency of inputs, we've got tax rates, capital consumption, human resource development, and free advisory services. And then the last one, it was the improving the efficiency of markets. Under improving the efficiency of markets, deregulation, competition, and leveling the playing fields. So that is all about the new economic paradigm. So thank you guys for your time. Hope we will see each other next time. Bye.